everyone, and welcome back to Mike. What are we called?
Above the Break.
Above the Break. Splashing from three, brought to you by True Classic Tees, the greatest t-shirts you'll ever wear. Make sure you want to look good, feel good, save money, and help people. Check out the link in our description to get the greatest tees on the planet. Use promo code CUBE15 at checkout. Going to help support the show, and you're going to do yourself a favor and look really good. Anyway, Mike, Game 7, baby. The underdog, Denver, came back from being 3-1 down and knocked out the favorites in the Clippers. I don't even know where to start with this one. I guess I'll ask you just off the top of your head, initial thoughts, and then we'll get into a little bit more of a breakdown.
100%. Dude, there's so much meat on this bone. I was watching the game yesterday, and I couldn't wait to just hop on with you and start talking about this today because we literally witnessed history on so many fronts. First of all, Jokic shows that scoring isn't the only way to go and dominate a team who just doesn't have a legitimate big. He is the antithesis to this small ball movement. He's a big with a lot of skill. He destroyed them. They tried to double team him off the jump street, and it's like, hey, look, dude, 16 points, 22 rebounds, and by the way, I'm just going to get double-digit assists as well, 13, I believe. It's dangerous. Then you go and look at Murray, who's just dropped 40 points, and then you go and look at Lou Williams, Kawhi Leonard, and Paul George combining for 31 points. He +9 over three guys on the other team. Obviously now, the 3-1 deficit was overcome for the second time in a row. It's only happened 13 times in NBA history, and the same team just did it back-to-back series in the same playoffs. On top of which, Doc Rivers now is the only coach who has multiple 3-1 advantage completely squandered. He did it with Orlando with T-Mac way back in the early 2000s. He did it with the Clippers, and he also now just did it for a third time. There's no one else who's done it more than once. He's done it for a third time now with the Clippers yet again. So here we are.
Yeah, and I want to ask you first, I guess, what do you attribute this to? Do you attribute it to mostly the fact that the Clippers choked and just couldn't close out the series? When we discussed it last, you said Clippers should probably take this in 5-6 games tops. They ended up losing in 7. Do you attribute that more to the Clippers blowing it or to the fact that Denver have the resolve that nobody gave them credit for?
I think Denver just needs to have some respect put on their name. I remember Jamal Murray before Game 5 against Utah. They were down 3-1. He said he was packing his bags in the bubble, and halfway through packing his bags, he dumped it all out and said, I don't want to go home. I'm not going home. He called for a team meeting. He spoke to everybody and said, I don't want to go home. I know y'all don't want to go home. We worked too damn hard, and let's go and give it our all. That was against Utah. You can imagine that the same conversation was had, especially in the sense that the Clippers are clearly the shining example of what happens when you build your team to beat a specific other team while looking past your current opponents. Dangerous lesson to be learned the hard way. So who's this on? The Clippers choked it, but Denver had to go and put their foot on their throat and make it happen for themselves in the end of the day. They've had some stellar fourth quarters in the game 5, 6, and 7. They were torching the Clippers, and the Clippers just had no response.
And, I mean, we look at this game, and when we think of dynamic duos coming out of this series, obviously all the hype the whole year had been around, Kawhi and Paul George. And the duo ended up being the Joker and Captain Canada, Mr. Jamal Murray. Mm-hmm. I won't even ask you if you were expecting this because I don't think anybody necessarily was. But I want to ask, in terms of dynamic duos now, Jamal Murray and the Joker, how far can they actually push into this playoff series and take it to who many would argue are probably the best dynamic duo in the NBA in AD and LeBron?
I think that LeBron and AD, if they have any advantage, it's the same thing as Miami having that advantage over Boston, getting to see what happened right in front of your eyes and be able to game plan for it. This is clearly not the time to be going and thinking that because you got Denver on the brink and all odds really are stacked against them that they're going to be out. They just did it twice, and there's no surprises now. So if you got get a commanding lead in the series and end up choking it out, this is just a testament to Denver's ability with their backs against the wall. There's really no excuses. There's no games. There's no surprises anymore. When it's against Utah, you're like, okay, it's Utah. But then it happens against Kawhi and Paul George with Lou Williams, Pat Bev, Montrezl Harrell. These guys are coming in here. They're ready to play, but they weren't ready to close. And that's the problem. This is the NBA. This is a 48-minute frame, and you got to be able to go from front to back. So LeBron and AD clearly have their hands full, and if they think anything less than that, then they're sorely mistaking themselves.
Yeah, and it seems like, at times, and I want to touch on Jamal Murray here, at times he can just look like the worst player on the floor, right? When he's cold, he's ice cold, but when he's hot, he looks like the greatest player to ever live, right? Like he just chucking up threes and nailing them from anywhere.
Oh my God.
He had an outstanding game, dropping 40 last night. What do you think his full potential is? Because I think last night the Joker was probably the best player on the floor. And if Jamal's second playing like that, when he's the number one, what do you think his actual top-end potential is?
No one thought that he'd be able to ever challenge Jokic as even claiming it was his team on any given night. Like, yes, he always had that raw talent. I remember watching him playing in the Canadian, the Canadian high school, exhibition games and Thon Maker and all, playing with all these guys. And, he was a little bit of a spark when he was playing back then, but that was years ago. We saw him come into the league, have defensive issues, trying to, the game is fast. Kenny Smith said it took him 2 years for the game to slow down on the NBA level because it's so much quicker. Not only the shot clock, but just the players, the athleticism you're dealing with. But he's caught up, and it looks scary. What's his potential? I don't know. Maybe just one of those guys coming in there and just dropping buckets on any given night. If he finds any sign of consistency and can do this for 60 games out of 82, he'll be legitimately in discussions for MVP. Maybe he'll finish 5th. Maybe he'll finish 6th in the voting. But this guy's crazy good. And the fact that we're even thinking about him and Jokic in the same sentence of whose team is it on any given night, that is a huge sign of respect and a tip of the cap here to Kitchener, Ontario's finest.
Yeah, for sure. And the poetic justice on Twitter was, at least as Canadians, is that Kawhi left a Canadian team to be knocked out by a Canadian. Speaking of Kawhi, though, it seemed like he was the man to beat, right, all year. This is the reigning champ. This is the reigning finals MVP. He's the guy to beat. And as you touched on earlier, he was, the Clippers kind of built a team to beat the Lakers, but weren't necessarily thinking about the very real threat in front of them in Denver. The Clippers now, they're going home in the second round. They've never made the Western Conference Final. What happens now for them, right? Like, what do they have to do in terms of, packaging up a deal, making themselves true contenders to actually come out maybe next year and legitimately, push for the championship?
Clippers are cooked. I've been shaking my head for the last 15, 20 seconds when you were asking that question. They're cooked. You know why? Paul George's trade. You know why? Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Danilo Gallinari, 2022 pick, 2024 pick, 2026 pick, and then 2 other pick swaps in the first round. That's 5 firsts. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who looks like a legitimate guy who's the heir to the throne for Chris Paul when he inevitably gets booted out of town on that team when they try to figure out what's going on. Plus, Gallinari's scoring punch wouldn't be so bad when you can't find a bucket in the fourth quarter. Now, would it? I'm just saying. Now, obviously, that was for the services of Paul George. He looked like Paul George for the last 4 games before this, Game 7, and he went right back to pandemic P right after for Game 7. We all know what happened in the first round. It looked atrocious. He's never really been that, especially closeout games. The last 4 years in Game 7s or elimination games, this guy shot 4 of 16 last game. He shot 5 of 21. He shot 2 of 13. He shot, he just doesn't really hit shots when you need him the most. He's hitting the side of the backboard when you guys have a lid on the basket. You guys gave away 5 first-round picks. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, another one of Canada's finest, booted out so you could bring this guy in. And then Danilo Gallinari, the Italian stallion, the rooster himself, he is not able to be on your team because you gave him away and you said, yeah, you're Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and 5 picks away from Paul George. And that, to me, that's just terrifying. So where does Clippers go from here? I don't know. Kawhi's on a 2-year deal. He just finished the first one. They can run the team back ostensibly. The Montrezl Harrell's an unrestricted free agent, so he's going to be getting paid now. That's going to eat up some of your salary cap if you sign him. There are rumors that saying that he might not be signed. Please, Toronto, go get that guy. Please, please, please. But yeah, at the end of the day, where do the Clippers go from here? They cross their fingers and hope that Kawhi Leonard stays. They hope that Paul George doesn't turn into George Paul. And other than that, they have no assets to really trade for anybody. So now they got to make themselves a destination to go and have free agents come toward them. But who wants to come and join this guy who can't hit shots? I don't know. And Kawhi Leonard, by the way, for everybody, he's not a defender he once was. This is not a DPOY anymore. We've seen him have spurts in Toronto because he could take a couple offensive possessions off because Lowry or Van Vliet or Siakam would go and hop in there and make something happen. But my God, man, I'm sorry. He looks ginger. He looked frustrated. This is a guy who doesn't show emotion, and he was angry last night. I don't think things look very good for Steve Ballmer's Los Angeles Clippers moving forward. I don't know what they're going to do if they don't get free agents to sign because they got no capital in the draft anymore.
Yeah, I think we finally found the answer to what gets Kawhi to show emotion, and it's the bucket repellent that I guess the Clippers had applied because they couldn't buy a basket towards the end. I mean, the closest they got was hitting the side of the backboard. The first field goal made in the fourth quarter was at 4 minutes left. Absurd, right? I mean, they lost in pretty much what felt like a blowout and the worst shooting performance I think we've ever seen in a fourth quarter.
By the way, the most losses in a game 7 is now held by Doc Rivers. He also has the most wins, but he's to be 6-8 in game 7s. First of all, why is every series going the full length? Like, and three of those are 3-1 leads blown. All right, I'm out. Oh, my goodness.
That's going to do it for us. That's going to do it for Above the Break this week. We'll be previewing the Western Conference Final as it progresses, as well as the Eastern one as those series progress. Be sure to let us know what you thought of today's clips. And don't forget to check out True Classic Tees. The link is in the description below. Cube 15 at checkout will save you money. And make sure you go